My name is Cassandra Lee Hallbrook. I am 31 years old. I want to start by telling you what kind of person I was before all of this happened because I think it matters. I was the kind of person who sent thank you cards within 48 hours. The kind who remembered how everyone took their coffee, who kept a running note on her phone of her friends' kids' names so she'd never blank at a birthday party. I wasn't perfect. I had a short fuse when I was hungry and I cried at commercials, and I once held a grudge about a parking spot for 3 weeks. But I was good. I tried to be good. And I believed, the way you believe things before the world teaches you otherwise, that if you were kind and patient and willing to extend grace, people would eventually meet you where you were. Diane Hallbrook taught me that some people have no interest in meeting you anywhere, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I met Marcus in the spring of 2019 at a work conference in Nashville. He was a project manager for a civil engineering firm, and I was there representing the HR software company I worked for. And we ended up at the same table at a dinner that neither of us had wanted to attend. He made a joke about the chicken being optimistically labeled herb roasted, and I laughed harder than the joke deserved. And by the time the keynote speaker finished talking about disruption in the infrastructure sector, we had exchanged numbers. We dated long distance for 7 months. He was in Columbus, Ohio. I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, and then I got a job offer in Columbus that felt less like coincidence and more like instruction from the universe, and I took it. We moved in together in a duplex near Clintonville, a neighborhood full of coffee shops and farmers markets and people who owned rain barrels unironically. And it was the happiest I had been in my adult life. Marcus was the kind of man who fixed things before you asked him to. Squeaky hinges, low tire pressure, the way I always forgot to schedule my own dentist appointments. He was steady and funny, and he had this habit of reading the last page of a book first because, as he explained it, he liked knowing there was an ending before he committed to the journey. I found that both maddening and deeply comforting. He was my person. I knew it the way you know a song is going to be your favorite before it's even finished. We got engaged in October of 2021 on the back porch of a rented cabin in Hocking Hills, with leaves coming down in orange sheets and a bottle of wine we'd been saving since our first anniversary. He got down on one knee and his voice shook a little, and I said yes before he finished the sentence. The next morning I called my mother and she screamed for 45 seconds straight. The morning after that, Marcus called his mother, and that's where the story actually begins. Diane Hallbrook was 63 years old and lived 20 minutes away in a house in Dublin, Ohio that she had shared with Marcus's father until his death 4 years earlier. She was a retired school librarian who now spent her time in a rotating cycle of activities: her garden club, her book club, her church choir, and an ever-expanding collection of grievances she kept carefully organized and ready for deployment. She was not a monster. I want to be clear about that because it would be easier if she were. Monsters are simple. You see them, you name them, you know what you're dealing with. Diane was something more complicated. She was a woman who had loved her son with an intensity that left no room for anyone else, and who had spent 4 years since her husband's death transferring the full weight of that love onto Marcus in a way that had calcified into something neither of them could quite name. When Marcus told her we were engaged, she cried. She said she was happy. She said I was a lovely girl. Then she asked if we'd considered a long engagement. Just to make sure, she said. There's no rush. Marcus told me about it that night, smiling, presenting it as a quirk, a mother thing. I smiled back and filed it away. The wedding was planned for September of 2022. We chose a venue in Columbus called Riverview Gardens, a renovated farmhouse on the Scioto River with a white tent and string lights, and a ceremony space under an old oak tree that had been standing since before Ohio was a state. I loved it the moment I saw it. It felt like the kind of place where things were meant to last. From the moment we put down the deposit, Diane had opinions. She had opinions about the caterer. She felt the menu was too adventurous. Not everyone eats salmon that way, Cassandra, and she suggested a buffet of items she described as universally appealing. which translated to a steam table of things I associated with church fellowship halls. We compromised. That was the first of many compromises, and at the time I thought that was what family meant. She had opinions about the flowers. She wanted carnations because they lasted longer. I wanted garden roses because I had wanted garden roses since I was 12 years old. She pointed out twice that carnations were more economical. I smiled and ordered the garden roses. She had opinions about the seating chart, the rehearsal dinner venue, the font on the invitations, the length of the ceremony, and the appropriateness of our DJ's playlist. She delivered these opinions in a particular way, never loud, never aggressive, always framed as gentle concern or friendly suggestion, always followed by a small self-deprecating laugh. As though she were embarrassed by her own helpfulness. "Oh, I don't mean to interfere, I just thought it was her preamble for everything, and I absorbed it, every time." Because she was Marcus's mother and she had lost her husband and I was going to be part of this family and I wanted it to work. I wanted her to love me, or at least to tolerate me with warmth. The photography was my one absolute non-negotiable. I had found our photographer, a woman named Riessa Tanaka, through a wedding blog I'd been following for years. Riessa shot on film and digital both, and her work had this quality I can only describe as permanent. Her photos looked like they had always existed. Like they were memories before the day even happened. Her packages were not cheap. I saved for 8 months. I booked her a year in advance. When I showed Diane the portfolio, she studied it the way she studied everything, carefully, looking for the exit. "She's very artsy," Diane said. "I love her," I said. "I'm sure she's wonderful," Diane said, in a tone that suggested she was sure of no such thing. "I just hope she gets everyone's good side." I let it go. I was getting good at letting things go. The months before the wedding were busy and bright. My best friend and maid of honor, Yolanda Price, flew in from Atlanta every other month to help with planning. My mother drove up from Charlotte twice. There were tastings and fittings and a bachelorette weekend in Cincinnati that involved a riverboat and a very aggressive wine flight. Marcus and I were happy. Genuinely, uncomplicated happy, in the way that you can be happy when the thing you've been working toward is finally close enough to touch. Diane attended every event she was invited to. She brought casseroles to planning meetings. She volunteered to address envelopes and then readdressed a stack of them because she felt my handwriting was a little hard to read on cream paper. She inserted herself into every available space. With the same pleasant, immovable energy of a piece of furniture you keep stubbing your toe on. And she had her phone out, always. She photographed everything: fittings, the venue walkthrough, the cake tasting, the rehearsal dinner setup. I assumed it was the behavior of a sentimental mother. I assumed wrong. The week before the wedding, she asked if she could have just a small role in the photography. She said she'd always been good with a camera. She said Riessa seemed like she might need an extra set of hands. I told her gently that Riessa worked alone and had a very specific process. I told her she should enjoy the day as a guest. She smiled. She said of course. She said she just wanted to help. The wedding was on a Saturday, the 17th of September. The weather was exactly what you'd order if you could order weather: 72 degrees, a light breeze, a sky so blue it looked like a theater backdrop. I got ready in a suite at the venue with Yolanda and my 2 other bridesmaids, Priya and Gwen. And my mother sat in the corner and cried quietly into a handkerchief she had brought specifically for that purpose, and Riessa moved around us like water, catching things I didn't even know were happening. There was a moment, about an hour before the ceremony, when I was standing in front of the full-length mirror in my dress, and my mother came to stand beside me. And she took my hand and didn't say anything, and Riessa caught it without us knowing, and I think that photograph, that one quiet moment, was the whole reason I had wanted a photographer who worked like Riessa worked. The ceremony was 22 minutes long. I don't remember much of it in linear sequence. It lives in my memory in fragments, the way important things do. Marcus's face when I came around the corner on my father's arm, the way the oak leaves moved. Our officiant, a friend from college named Devin who had known us both long enough to say true things. The moment Marcus's voice cracked during his vows and nobody laughed because it was too real to laugh at. We danced, we ate. My uncle gave a toast that was 40% roast and 60% genuine love. Yolanda gave one that was the reverse. Diane sat at the head family table and smiled and clinked her glass, and I thought, this is going to be okay. We are going to figure this out. I thought that. I genuinely thought it. We flew to Costa Rica for our honeymoon, 2 weeks in a house with a pool and a view of the rainforest, where we did very little and felt enormously restored by it. We came home tanned and soft around the edges, the way you are when you've slept enough and worried about nothing. The wedding photos arrived 6 weeks after the ceremony. Riessa sent a digital gallery link, 843 images, and I opened it sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee on a Tuesday morning when Marcus was at work. And I cried for 20 minutes in the best possible way. They were perfect. Every single one of them was perfect. I texted the link to Diane that afternoon with a note that said, Riessa's gallery is ready. I know you'll love them. She responded 4 hours later with a single heart emoji. I didn't think anything of it. The wedding album was the next step. Riessa offered a design service where she would curate a selection of images and lay them out in a physical book, 60 pages, linen cover, archival quality. Marcus and I sat down with her selections and made some adjustments and approved the final design in early November. We ordered 2 albums, one for us, one as a gift for my in-laws because I thought it might mean something to Diane to have a copy, to have something physical she could hold. We paid for rush delivery. The albums arrived the week before Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving at the Holbrook house was a production. Diane hosted every year and it was one of her genuine pleasures. She cooked from scratch, she set a formal table. She made the kind of meal that took 3 days to prepare and 20 minutes to demolish. I had come to love it, actually. It was one of the places where I could see who she might have been, who she still was sometimes, underneath the calcified watchfulness. We brought both albums to dinner. I planned to give her hers after dessert as a kind of gift. I had written a card that said something about how glad I was to be part of the family. I meant it. Marcus's brother, Devin, was there with his girlfriend, Amber. Devin was 34, 4 years older than Marcus, with his father's easy laugh and his mother's strategic silences. Amber was new, they'd been dating about 6 months, and she was warm and a little nervous and spent most of dinner making a genuine effort, which I recognized and respected. Dinner was good. The turkey was good. The conversation was the regular mix of family news and old stories and mild competitive recounting that all large dinners tend toward. Diane was in her element, moving between the kitchen and the table with the efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times. After pie, I got the album from the bag I'd brought it in and set it on the table in front of Diane. We had a second one made for you, I said. We wanted you to have it. Her face moved through something I didn't have time to categorize. Oh, she said, how thoughtful. She opened it slowly. We all leaned in. Devin made sounds of appreciation at the first few spreads. Amber said the photos were beautiful. Marcus put his arm around me. Diane turned the pages quietly, and then she stopped. She had stopped on the spread that showed the first look. That moment before the ceremony when Marcus saw me for the first time in my dress at the bottom of the venue's back staircase. Riessa had positioned herself at the top of the stairs and caught it from above. Marcus with his back to me, then turning, then his face. And me in my dress, my hair up, my face turned up toward his. I always thought that staircase photo would have been stronger with a wider angle, Diane said. Nobody responded. She turned the page. She continued through the album in this way, saying small things, measured things. The lighting here is a little yellow. I think they rushed this one. Devin is covering part of your dress in this one, Marcus. And then she turned to the reception section. And she paused on a group photo, the one we'd taken with Marcus's extended family, his aunts and cousins and grandmother. A big, loud, joyful group shot in front of the oak tree. Diane pointed at me in the center of the photo, my arm around Marcus's grandmother. I just think she could have positioned you differently, Cassandra. You're a little washed out here. That's actually the lighting from the sun, I said, still mild. still patient. Maybe, Diane said. She closed the album. I smiled. Marcus squeezed my hand. Devin changed the subject. On the drive home, Marcus said his mother was just particular about things, that she'd probably cry over the album privately, that I shouldn't take it personally. I nodded. I looked out the window at the dark Ohio highway. I didn't know it yet, but the album was already done. In Diane's mind, it was already done. 3 days after Thanksgiving, Marcus's Aunt Patricia, his father's sister, who lived in Akron and whom I had met exactly twice, called Marcus. He was in the other room. I could hear the tone of his voice but not the words. When he came out, his face was careful. Aunt Pat saw the wedding photos, he said. Okay, I said. The ones my mom shared. Mum, I said. She wants to know which editing software my mom used, he said. He paused. Because she said the photos my mom sent her look different from the ones in Riessa's gallery. I put down my book. Different how? I asked. Marcus sat down slowly. She said in the photos my mom shared, the bride looks. He stopped. He rubbed his hand over his face in that way he did when he was trying to be careful. She said the bride looks like a different person. The room went very quiet. Marcus, I said. I know, he said. What did your mother do? He didn't answer right away. He pulled out his phone and after a moment he turned it toward me. He had Aunt Patricia's text thread open and she had forwarded one of the photos Diane had shared. It was the staircase photo, the first look, the one I had loved most. Marcus was there, turning, his face full of light. The staircase was there, the venue was there, I was there. A woman in my dress exactly, standing where I had stood. But the face was not my face. It was a face assembled from light and probability, smoother, more symmetrical, with larger eyes and different cheekbones, and a nose that had never been broken in a soccer game at age 15. It was a beautiful face. It looked like a photograph of a woman who had never existed. Diane had used an AI image editor to replace my face in our wedding photos. I sat with that sentence in my head for a long time. I turned it over. I tried to find the interpretation that made it something other than what it was. I couldn't find one. How many did she send? I asked. My voice was very even. Aunt Pat got 6, Marcus said, but she said Mom has been posting them. Posting them where? He turned the phone around. He had pulled up Diane's Facebook. She had been posting them for 2 days. There were 11 photos, all from our wedding, all with my face replaced. In the caption of the first one she had written, "My son's beautiful wedding day, so blessed." Under a photo of Marcus and me at the altar, a face that was not mine looking up at him with eyes that were not mine, someone had commented, "What a gorgeous bride." And Diane had replied, "She is, isn't she?" I got up from the couch and walked to the kitchen and stood at the sink for a while, looking out at the backyard, at the neighbor's fence, at the ordinary dark November evening. Marcus came and stood behind me. He put his hands on my shoulders. "Cassie," he said, "I need you to call her," I said. "Right now," he called. She didn't answer. He left a message that was careful and firm, and I could hear him trying to split the difference between protecting me and protecting her, and I knew that split was going to get harder before it got easier. She texted back 40 minutes later, "I just thought the photos could be a little more polished. Some of them weren't very flattering. I was trying to help. I can take them down if it's a big deal." If it's a big deal, I read that text 4 times. Marcus looked at me, I looked at Marcus. "I need a few minutes," I said. I went upstairs. I sat on the edge of the bed. I opened Riessa's gallery on my phone and I scrolled through every one of her 843 photographs. My face. My actual face, the one I had been born with and grown into and cried happy tears with on the best day of my life. The one that was mine. I thought about what it meant that Diane had looked at those photos and decided they needed fixing. I thought about what she must have felt, sitting down with whatever application she had used, carefully selecting my face and replacing it with something she preferred. I thought about the version of me she had been carrying in her head this whole time and whether it had a face at all. I did not call her. I did not text. I opened the Notes app on my phone and I started writing down exactly what had happened, with dates and times and screenshots. I didn't know yet what I was going to do with it. I just knew I needed to start keeping track. The morning after I found out, I made coffee and I sat at the kitchen table and I did not cry. That surprised me a little. I had expected to feel the hot, immediate grief of something precious being taken. And it was there, underneath, running like a current, but what sat on top of it was something cooler and more deliberate. I felt, for the first time in my relationship with Diane Holbrook, entirely clear. Marcus came downstairs at 7. He had not slept well. I could see it in the shadows under his eyes, the careful way he moved, like a man navigating a room that might have changed overnight. He sat across from me. I handed him coffee. She took them down, he said. I checked this morning. I know, I said. I checked too. Cassie, I need to tell you something, I said. And I need you to hear it as a fact, not as an attack on your mother. He nodded. He held his mug with both hands. What she did was not editing, I said. It was not a filter or a color correction or an enhancement. She replaced my face with a different face on our wedding photos. And then she posted them publicly and let people compliment a woman who isn't me on the best day of my life. That is not a mistake. That takes time and intention and a deliberate series of choices. Marcus was quiet. I know, he said finally. And her text said, if it's a big deal, I know, so I need you to understand that I am not overreacting. I am reacting exactly correctly to something that is genuinely serious. He reached across the table and covered my hand with his. You're right, he said. You're completely right. I'm going to talk to her. I know you are, I said, and I want you to, but I also need to figure out what I want to come from that conversation. Because I don't want her to apologize and then we all move on and this just becomes a story she tells differently at Christmas. He looked at me for a long moment. What do you want? I want to understand why she did it, I said. I want to understand what she intended, and I want to know if she has copies saved somewhere. If she sent them to other people. He made calls, I took notes. Over the next 4 days, we pieced together the scope of it. Diane had shared the altered photos with 9 people. Aunt Patricia, 2 of Marcus's cousins, her own sister, 3 women from her church, and 2 friends from her garden club. All via Facebook Messenger or direct email. She had posted 11 on her public Facebook and 6 on a semi-private family and friends group she administered. The photos she had shared were not all the same image, but they were all the same intervention. My face gone, replaced with something chosen, something she had curated. Riessa, our photographer, called me on a Wednesday afternoon. Someone in Diane's social circle had recognized the venue and tagged Riessa in a comment on the public posts before they were taken down, and Riessa had seen the images. She was, professionally speaking, calm. Personally speaking, she was furious on my behalf. Those images are under copyright, she said. She doesn't have the right to alter them. She barely has the right to post them. I know, I said. I can send a cease and desist if you want. Not yet, I said. I want to handle this personally first. Okay, Riessa said, but Cassie. Document everything, screenshot everything she posted before it comes down, get the dates and times. I told her I already had. Marcus met his mother for lunch that Thursday at a restaurant in Dublin, alone, because I had agreed that was the right starting move. I waited at home and read nothing and watched nothing and sat with the particular stillness of someone waiting for information they know will be hard to hear. He came home looking like he had driven a long distance without stopping. He sat on the couch. I sat next to him. She cried, he said. I waited. She said she didn't think of it as changing you. She said the app she used, she found it on TikTok, some AI enhancement thing. She said it just made everything look more like a portrait. She said she didn't realize it was replacing your face. She thought it was just smoothing. I said nothing. I told her that wasn't true, Marcus said. I told her we could all see that it wasn't true, that Aunt Pat called and asked which editing software she used because she could tell the bride was different. She said Pat was exaggerating. Did she apologize? A beat. She said she was sorry I was upset. I nodded. She also said he stopped. Tell me, she said the photographer you chose produced some unflattering photos and she was just trying to make sure you were represented well. there it was. I had known, without knowing I knew, that this was the real thing underneath. The face she had replaced my face with was the face she had imagined when she imagined who Marcus should have married. Not more beautiful necessarily, though she was in the particular symmetrical way of AI-generated faces, but more suited, more correct, the right kind of bride. Okay, I said. Cassie, I'm not going to cry about this, I said. I'm going to figure out what to do. That weekend, I called my maid of honor, Yolanda. Yolanda worked in healthcare administration and had, over the years, developed a problem-solving brain that cut through sentiment with the efficiency of a good chef's knife. She also loved me, which meant she listened to the whole story with patience before she said anything. You need a lawyer, she said. For what? For understanding your options. Not necessarily for suing anyone, but you need to know what Diane actually did legally and what can be done about it. She was right. I found a family law and digital rights attorney named Patricia Osei through a recommendation from a colleague. I met her at her office in downtown Columbus on a Tuesday morning. Her office had a view of the Scioto, and she wore reading glasses on a beaded chain, and she listened to me with the steady attention of someone who has heard many stories and remains interested in each. 1. I showed her the screenshots, I showed her Riessa's email, I showed her the notes I had been keeping. She was quiet for a moment after. Your photographer has the clearest legal claim, she said. Copyright infringement for the alteration and publication of her work. She'd have to be the one to pursue that. She's willing to, I said. Good. As for you, what Diane did constitutes unauthorized use of your likeness. It's more complex because it was your wedding photo and you were already in it, but the alteration creates a new issue. She published a version of the photo implying your presence while replacing your image. That's not nothing. What do I want it to be? I asked. She looked at me. What do you want? I thought about it honestly. I want a real apology. I want to understand if she has more copies somewhere, and I want it to not happen again. Then what you're building, she said, is leverage, documentation, evidence of scope and intent. The legal claims, copyright, likeness, those are tools. You don't have to use them, but you want to have them. She told me what Riessa had told me, do not confront Diane yet. Let her believe the situation had passed. Watch what she did next. If this is who she is, Patricia said, she'll show you again. People like this always do. They can't help it. They believed they were right. I drove home along the river. The November trees were bare. I thought about what people like this meant, what it meant to be someone who was so certain of her own correctness that she would replace her daughter-in-law's face in wedding photographs and describe it as helpfulness. I thought about the months I had spent trying to be liked by this woman, all the compromises about caterers and flowers and seating charts. All the times I had absorbed her small corrections and her gentle undermining and told myself it would get better. Maybe it would have. Maybe, if she had not had access to AI editing tools, it would have stayed at the level of snide comments about fonts and steam table buffets. But she had had access to those tools. And she had used them, and that told me something that all the Thanksgivings and casseroles in the world couldn't untell. I started keeping a closer eye on Diane's social media. Most of it was ordinary garden club updates, church choir announcements, a running series of posts about her hydrangeas, but every so often something would catch. In December, she posted a throwback photo from a Holbrook family Christmas party, a photo from 5 years earlier, well before Marcus and I had met. She captioned it, "Some of my favorite people." Family is everything, which was a normal thing to say. But the comments included several from her church friends asking about Marcus's wife, and Diane's responses were all variations of the same thing. A vague reference to me as Marcus's girl without my name, followed by a pivot to talking about Marcus. In January, she sent a holiday card to Aunt Patricia. Aunt Patricia, who had remained sympathetic to me throughout, texted me a photo of it. The card was a collage of family photos. Marcus was in it. I was not. It wasn't that I'd been cropped or replaced this time. I simply wasn't in any of the photos she'd chosen. A whole holiday card of Holbrook family moments, and I had been edited out by selection. I added it to the folder. In February, Devin and Amber got engaged. There was a party at Diane's house. I went. I brought wine. I smiled. I congratulated them warmly because I genuinely liked Amber and I was genuinely happy for Devin. At some point during the party, I ended up in the kitchen with Diane while she was refilling the cheese board. Just the two of us for the first time since the photo incident. She was pleasant. Perfectly pleasant. She asked about my job. She complimented my sweater. She said nothing about the photos. I said nothing about the photos. I helped her carry the cheese board out and rejoin the party, and at no point did either of us acknowledge the things sitting in the room between us. But I watched her. I watched the way she spoke to Amber warmly, personally, with eye contact and her full name. I watched the way she organized the party photos she was going to take, positioning people, directing angles. I watched her move through her own house with the confidence of someone who believed fully in her own version of events. She was already planning something. I could feel it the way you feel a change in weather, not in anything specific, just in the atmosphere. It was Riessa who found it. She had set up a Google alert for her own studio name, Standard Practice, and in March, a result came up that she sent to me immediately. Diane had entered a regional photo competition. It was called the Central Ohio Heritage Photography Exhibition, a community arts event run by the Dublin Arts Council, Amateur Division. The category was Family and Celebration. The submission deadline had been in February. The exhibition opening was in April. Diane had submitted one of our wedding photos. Riessa sent me the submission page. I opened it on my phone sitting in my car in a parking garage after work, engine running, heat on. The photo was one of Riessa's. I could recognize the composition immediately, the color calibration, the way she used light. It was the group shot at the reception, the big family photo in front of the oak tree, the one Diane had critiqued over the Thanksgiving album. But in this version, the photo had been altered. My face again replaced. A smoother, more symmetrical face. Looking out from between Marcus and his grandmother with eyes that had never squinted in a soccer game or cried in a parking garage, or looked up at a man on a staircase on the 17th September. And in the submission form where it asked for photographer credit, Diane had put her own name. She had entered our wedding photo, altered without my consent, with my face replaced, and taken from our photographer without permission, under her own name in a public exhibition. In a category called Family and Celebration, I sat in the parking garage for a long time. Then I called Riessa, then I called Patricia Osei, then I called Yolanda. They all said different versions of the same thing. Don't call Diane, not yet. Let her believe she's safe. Let her get to the opening. I drove home. Marcus was making dinner. The kitchen smelled like garlic and olive oil, and I sat at the table and I told him everything. The competition, the altered photo, the stolen credit. He went very still in the way that he did when he was trying not to say something he couldn't take back. She entered our wedding photo, he said, in a competition. Under her name? Yes. He turned off the stove. He sat down. I'm going to call her, Marcus, I said. Please, not yet. Patricia said we need to let her get to the opening. If we call her now, she takes the photo down and nothing happens, and she finds a way to reframe it. But if she shows up to that exhibition having publicly claimed credit for a photograph she altered without consent and submitted without the photographer's permission, in front of a room full of people, then it's not just a family disagreement anymore, he said. Exactly. He was quiet for a long moment. The garlic was burning gently in the pan. He got up and moved it. She really thought she could do this, he said. She really thought nobody would find out. She thought I didn't matter enough for anyone to look, I said. He came back to the table. He took my hands. His eyes were red around the edges. You matter, he said. You matter more than any of this. I am so sorry. I squeezed his hands. I believed him, but I also knew that we weren't done yet. The Central Ohio Heritage Photography Exhibition opened on a Friday evening in April at the Dublin Arts Council Gallery. A clean, bright space on Bridge Street with white walls and track lighting and tall windows that let in the last of the day's light before it faded into the kind of soft purple dusk that only happens In the Midwest in early spring, when the air still carries winter in it, but the trees are starting to doubt that winter was ever real. I had been inside that gallery once before, 2 years earlier, for a ceramics show a friend from work had been part of. I had walked through it on a Saturday afternoon, eating a shortbread cookie from the refreshments table and thinking about nothing in particular. And I had no way of knowing then that I would come back to it under these circumstances. That this small community art space on Bridge Street would be the place where a year's worth of quiet documentation and patience and carefully swallowed anger finally resolved itself into something I could live with. We got there at 7:15, Marcus drove. I sat in the passenger seat and watched Columbus move past the window, the Scioto, the downtown lights, the familiar landmarks of a city I had made my own over 5 years. Yolanda was in the back seat. She had flown in from Atlanta that morning on a 6 a.m. flight because that was the kind of friend she was, the kind who got on a plane when it mattered and didn't make you ask twice. She had brought a carry-on bag and a very particular expression she wore when she had decided something was going to go well, chin slightly lifted, mouth set, eyes watchful. I had seen that expression before, I trusted it. Riessa had driven herself. She met us in the parking lot, and I was struck again by how calm she was, not the calm of someone who didn't care, but the calm of someone who cared so much that she had moved all the way through feeling it and come out the other side into something operational. She was a working photographer. She dealt in evidence and composition and the precise management of light. She had been managing this situation with the same precision she brought to everything. Patricia O's had also driven herself. She was there, as she had said, purely personally. She was wearing a dark coat and her reading glasses on their beaded chain, and she had a bag with her that I had been told contained printed copies of the submission form, copyright documentation, and Riessa's original raw file metadata, should any of it become necessary. We hoped it wouldn't become necessary, but we had it. The 5 of us stood in the parking lot for a moment. The evening was cool, the way April evenings in Ohio often are, the calendar insisting on spring while the air remains unconvinced. I had worn a blazer over a silk top which felt like the right note, dressed for something, not dressed for a fight. Okay, Yolanda said. Okay, I said. We went in. The gallery was busy but not crowded. The opening reception drew perhaps 60 or 70 people. Local art community members and the families of participants, and the kind of civic-minded Dublin residents who showed up to these things because they believed in showing up. There were volunteers in lanyards and a table with wine in plastic cups and small cookies and a guest book by the door. String quartet music played from a portable speaker somewhere, a little tinny, entirely earnest. We got wine. We looked at other work. We let ourselves be absorbed into the room the way you absorb yourself into a space when you want to seem like you're not waiting for anything. The work in the exhibition was good, actually. Better than I'd expected. There was a series of portraits of elderly veterans that had an uncommon dignity. A set of landscape photographs from the Hocking Hills that made me think about our engagement trip, briefly and tenderly. A photo of a family at a county fair, parents, 3 kids. A funnel cake being shared that captured something so precisely true about the particular exhausted joy of that kind of summer day that I stood in front of it for a moment and just appreciated it. I was capable of appreciating things, even tonight. Riessa had mapped the space on her reconnaissance visit the previous afternoon. The family and celebration section was in the back gallery, a separate room connected to the main space by a wide doorway, with track lighting calibrated slightly warmer to suit the material. Diane's submission was on the east wall, 3rd from the right. We knew its coordinates the way you know the coordinates of something you've been thinking about for a long time. We did not go there first. We stayed in the main gallery for 20 minutes. I finished my wine. Marcus refilled his. Yolanda found a woman she knew tangentially from a conference and exchanged pleasantries with the fluid social ease that was one of her superpowers. Patricia stood near the window and looked at the river, content and unhurried. At 7:40, Diane arrived. I saw her come in through the front door with her garden club friends. Beverly, Margaret, Sue, and a woman whose name I had never learned but who was always at things like this. Small and brisk with close-cropped silver hair. They were dressed for the occasion, the good jewelry, the blazers, the shoes that required some commitment. Diane was in the navy blazer she wore to church on Sundays and the choir's Christmas concert and Marcus's college graduation. The blazer that meant, this is important. I am here for something important. She moved through the front gallery with the particular energy of someone who knows where they're going and is taking their time getting there for the pleasure of the anticipation. She greeted a couple near the door, paused at the ceramics section, said something to Beverly that made Beverly laugh. She was, in that moment, completely herself, social and assured and operating from the conviction that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. I watched from across the room and I felt something I didn't expect. I felt sad for her, not in a generous, above-it-all way, in a genuine, bone-deep way. This woman had spent 63 years being exactly who she was. And who she was had led her here, to this moment that she thought was a triumph and that was going to turn into something else entirely. And she didn't know, she was happy. She was standing in a gallery in her navy blazer and she was happy, and I was the person who was about to take that from her. I held that feeling for a moment. I didn't try to set it aside, it was real and it deserved to be real. Then Marcus put his hand on my arm and said quietly, "They're heading to the back." I nodded. I put down my wine glass. I smoothed my blazer, we gave it 8 minutes. We counted them. Then we drifted toward the back gallery. The room was smaller than the main gallery with 8 pieces on its walls. The grandfather's 90th birthday party was on the north wall, next to a photo of a Diwali celebration that was genuinely stunning. I noted it and thought I would come back to it. The 4th of July family photo was on the east wall, and next to it, under a pool of warm track lighting, was Diane's submission. Riessa's composition, Riessa's light, my wedding. It was a 12 by 18 print, matted and framed in simple black. Even from across the small room, I recognized the quality of the image. The way the late September light fell across the group in that particular angled way that you couldn't manufacture. That you could only catch if you were paying attention. Marcus was in the center with his arm around his grandmother. Devin and Amber were to his right, Amber laughing at something. My parents were at the end of the group, my mother's hand lifted to wave at someone outside the frame. And beside Marcus, where I had been standing, arm around his grandmother's other shoulder, was a woman who wore my dress and stood at my height and had her hair arranged in the style my hairdresser had spent 2 hours constructing on the morning of September 17th. But it was not my face. Diane was standing in front of the photo with Beverly on one side and Margaret on the other. Beverly was saying something that I couldn't hear from where we'd entered the room, and Diane was receiving it with a kind of modest pleasure that reminded me, against my will, of the way she accepted compliments about her Thanksgiving turkey, with practiced humility that was also, underneath it, pride. She had made something, she was proud of it. She was letting her friends see her be proud of it. I walked forward, not fast, not with any particular performance of entry. Just forward at a normal pace, the way you cross a room. "It really is something," I said. Diane turned. The sequence of her expression was quick but readable: surprise, recalibration, pleasantness. She had always been fast with the pleasantness. It was one of the things she was genuinely good at. "Cassandra," she said. "Marcus, what a nice surprise." She looked at Yolanda. "And Yolanda, how lovely, I didn't know you were in town." "Flew in this morning," Yolanda said warmly. Yolanda was better at warmth as neutral stance than almost anyone I knew. Beverly was looking between us with the bright, slightly tense alertness of someone who can sense the temperature changing, but hasn't identified the source yet. "Is this your piece?" Yolanda asked, gesturing at the photo, directing the question at Diane. "It is," Diane said. The pride settled back over her face. "I've always loved photography. This one felt right for the family and celebration category." "It's a beautiful composition," Yolanda said, and she said it without inflection, which was a skill I had watched her deploy in hospital administration meetings, and I deeply respected it. "Thank you," Diane said. Riessa, I said. Riessa stepped forward from where she had been standing at the periphery of our small group. She was carrying a folder. She had been carrying it the whole time, naturally, the way you carry something that belongs in your hands. I watched Diane register Riessa. I watched the first hairline fracture appear in the pleasantness. This is Riessa Tanaka, I said to Beverly, to the group, to the room, to whoever was within range. My voice was conversational. I was not performing outrage, I was not shaking. I had rehearsed being steady for months, and steadiness had become, somewhere along the way, genuine. She photographed our wedding, Marcus and mine. She's the photographer of this image. A brief silence, not a long one, but long enough. There's some similarity, certainly, Diane began. I used this as inspiration. I had the photo at home, and it's my image, Riessa said. She said it the way she said everything, without heat, without apology. She opened the folder and produced a printed copy of the original photograph, the unaltered one from the gallery, with her studio watermark and copyright notation printed on the back. She held it alongside the framed print on the wall. Even in the warm track lighting, the match was not ambiguous. Same moment, same angle. Same distribution of people, same fall of September light, same oak tree in the background releasing its first September leaves. The only differences were the alterations, the smoothed color grade, the adjusted contrast, and the face in the center of the group that did not belong to any person who had ever stood in that field on that day. Beverly looked between the prints, Margaret looked, the silver-haired woman I didn't know looked. 2 or 3 other gallery visitors had drifted close, drawn by the quality of silence that collects around something significant. The composition, the lighting, the moment, these are mine, Riessa said. I can pull the raw file metadata if it's useful. The EXIF data will show my camera, my settings, the timestamp. It matches the gallery record of when that photograph was taken. Diane, Beverly said carefully, just her name, just that. Diane's posture had changed. Not collapsed, she was not a woman who collapsed, but something had left it, some of the forward certainty. I was enhancing it, she said. It needed polish. The photographer, she glanced at Riessa. The original had some issues I thought I could improve. You changed the bride's face, I said, still conversational, still even. That's not enhancement. That's alteration, and I'm the bride, that's my wedding. I let that sit. The submission form lists Diane Holbrook as photographer, Riessa said, producing the copy of the submission. She had it printed in clear 12-point type. She held it so the people nearest us could see, not as editor, not as enhancer. As photographer, I didn't think the form was just asking who submitted it. The photographer credit field, Riessa said gently, pointing to the line on the form. One of the gallery volunteers, a young woman with a lanyard and a clipboard and the expression of someone who had not signed up for this but was prepared to handle it, had made her way to the edge of our group. She had been close enough to hear. She was looking at the prints, the submission form, the original. I'm going to need to speak with you, she said to Diane. About the submission, Diane's garden club friends had, over the course of the last 2 minutes, moved incrementally backward. Not abandoned her, they were still there, still physically present, but the perimeter of the group had softened in that particular social way that means, we are with you, but we are not in this. Marcus stepped forward then. He had been standing just behind my right shoulder, and I had been aware of him there the whole time. A particular awareness that was different from tactical support. It was the awareness of someone you love standing in a hard moment, and the difference matters. Mom, he said, not loudly, just her name. She looked at him. We gave you the photo as a gift, he said. We wanted you to have it, that was what it was, a gift. It wasn't permission to alter it, and it wasn't yours to claim. The room was very quiet now. The string quartet music from the main gallery felt very far away. I was trying to make it beautiful, Diane said. Her voice had changed. Something had shifted underneath the pleasantness, and what was underneath was not meanness or calculation, but something more complicated and, in its way, more painful. She believed it. She had genuinely believed she was making something better. She had looked at a photograph of her son's wedding day and seen a problem she could solve, and she had solved it, and she had not understood, not fully. Not until this moment with its track lighting and its clipboard and its quiet audience, that what she had erased in the solving was not a technical deficiency. It was me. The gallery volunteer spoke to Diane privately in the corner of the back gallery for about 10 minutes. Riessa joined them. Patricia Ose, I drifted to the edge of the conversation, not intervening, just present, in the way that attorneys are sometimes most useful by simply being visible. The rest of us moved out of the way. Yolanda and I went back to the main gallery. We stood near the window that looked out over the parking lot, and the April night was blue-black beyond it, and she put her arm around me and didn't say anything for a moment. "How are you?" she asked finally. "Strange," I said. "Strange how?" I thought about it honestly. "I thought I'd feel more," I said. "I thought there'd be something that felt like winning. But I mostly just feel tired and a little sad." "That's because you're a decent person," Yolanda said. "Winning when it costs someone something always feels like that." "It doesn't mean you were wrong." "I wasn't wrong." "No," she said, "you absolutely were not." We stood there a while longer. Through the doorway to the back gallery, I could see the shapes of the conversation continuing: Diane's posture, the volunteer's clipboard, Riessa's calm. I watched Marcus. He was standing a little apart, not managing anything, just present. He had his hands in his pockets. He was watching his mother with an expression I recognized from the faces of people who are seeing something they'd suspected for a long time become undeniably true, and who are grieving the confirmation of it even as they accept it. The photo was removed from the exhibition before the end of the evening. The gallery volunteer handled it professionally and without drama. She simply took it down and logged the removal on her clipboard. And the nail on the east wall was left empty for the rest of the night. The submission was formally disqualified from the competition. I was told this in a brief conversation with the gallery's director, a calm man named Gerald, who thanked us for bringing it to the organization's attention and looked genuinely pained at the situation. Diane left around 9. Her garden club friends went with her. Beverly hugged her at the door in the way you hug someone when you're not sure what to say but want to convey that you're still there. Diane accepted the hug with the stiffness of someone who is holding herself together through the precise application of effort. She did not look at me on her way out. I watched her go. Riessa sent the formal cease and desist the following week. It covered the altered images, any copies Diane retained, any further distribution, and any future use of Riessa's photographs without written consent. Diane did not contest it. She did not respond at all. Actually, her silence on the matter was, in its way, the most coherent thing she had done in months. The harder conversations happened over the following weeks in increments. Marcus talked to her first, alone, the way he had talked to her in the fall, sitting across from her at her dining room table, the house quiet around them. Everything familiar, and therefore more loaded than any neutral space would have been. He came home from that conversation carrying it in his body the way you carry something heavy, not limping, just more deliberate, more careful with each step. "She said she was trying to protect me," he told me that night. We were in bed, lights off, talking at the ceiling the way we sometimes did when things were too large for face-to-face. "Protect you from what?" A long pause. "From a version of the wedding that she couldn't be proud of," he said. "That's what she said. She said she looked at the photos and she couldn't see, she kept saying she couldn't see what she expected to see." I thought about that for a while. "What did she expect to see?" I asked, though I suspected I knew. "I don't think she knew," he said. "I think that was the problem. She had an idea of what my wedding would look like, my wife would look like, and when the real thing arrived, she didn't know what to do with the gap between what she'd imagined and what was actually there. So she closed the gap, with a face she preferred, with a face she could imagine," he said. "I think that's different. I think she couldn't imagine yours, not because of anything wrong with it. Because imagining yours would have required accepting that I belonged to someone real, who chose me and whom I chose, and that's a loss for her even though it's not supposed to be." I was quiet. "That doesn't make it okay," he said. "I know," I said, "but it helps me understand it." We were both quiet for a while. Down the street, someone's dog barked twice and then stopped. She loves you, I said, not as an excuse, as a fact. She does, he said, in the way she knows how. The way she knows how is a problem. Yeah, he said, I told her that. He had. He had told her, clearly and without a buffer of diplomatic softening, that what she had done had not been an act of love but an act of erasure, and that the difference was not subtle. And that Cassie, he used my name, my short name, the one Diane hadn't used until the birthday dinner, was his wife and his life, and that being part of his life meant accepting the life he had. Not the one she had designed for him. She had cried, he had held her hand. They had sat at the dining room table for a long time. She called me on a Tuesday morning in late April while I was getting ready for work. I saw her name on the phone and I stood in the bathroom with my mascara wand in my hand and I thought, this is the moment. Whatever she says next is going to be what we build the next 20 years on. I answered, Cassandra, she said. Hi, Diane. A pause. I could hear her breathing. I could hear the particular quality of someone collecting themselves. I owe you an apology, she said. A real one, not an I'm sorry you were upset. I know Marcus told you I said that in November. He was right to tell you. It was a coward's apology and you deserved better. I sat down on the edge of the bathtub. I replaced your face, she said, in your wedding photos. I told myself a lot of stories about why that was acceptable and none of them were true. It wasn't acceptable. It was a violation of something that belonged to you, and then I entered it in a competition as though it were mine, and that was worse. A beat. I've been sitting with that word, violation. I didn't want to use it because it sounds so large, but I think it's the right word. It's the right word, I said quietly. I know, she said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the photos and the posting and the competition and the way I handled the apology in November, and she stopped. For a lot of things I think that I haven't fully cataloged yet. I held the phone and looked at the bathroom wall for a moment. Thank you, I said. That means something? I don't expect it to fix things, she said. I know that's not how it works. No, I said, but it's a beginning. We talked for 20 minutes. Not about everything, there was too much and neither of us was ready for all of it at once, but about enough. She told me she had shown Riessa's unaltered gallery to her sister, who had told her plainly that she needed to look at what she had done and understand it. She told me she had done that. I believed her, or believed her as much as you can believe someone at the beginning of a changed thing, which is with hope and some caution. When we hung up, I finished putting on my mascara. I looked at my face in the mirror for a moment. The nose that had been broken at 15 in a soccer game reset imperfectly so it sits slightly left of center. The dark circles that never fully go away no matter how much I sleep. The fine line starting at the corner of my right eye that wasn't there 2 years ago. The face I have been growing into since the day I was born, irregular and unrepeatable and entirely mine. I went to work. The months that followed were not simple. I want to be honest about that. An apology, even a real one, does not instantly restructure a relationship. There were still dinners where the silences had too much in them, still moments where Diane and I orbited each other with excessive politeness, still instances where I could feel us both deciding, independently and simultaneously, to let something go rather than pick it up. That letting go was work. It cost something each time. But we did it because the alternative was to stop trying entirely and neither of us was willing to do that. Marcus's birthday dinner was in June, and that was where I first felt something shift. It was a small dinner, just us and Devin and Amber and Diane at our house, around the table on the back porch because the evening was warm enough to eat outside. I had made Marcus's favorite, short ribs that I'd been braising since noon with polenta and a green salad. And a cake from the bakery in Clintonville that did the dense chocolate thing he'd loved since before I knew him. Yolanda had sent a bottle of good bourbon from Atlanta. It felt for the first time in a long time like a normal evening. Diane was different at that dinner. Not transformed, people don't transform, not really, but quieter in a different way. The watchfulness was still there, but it had changed character. It felt less like surveillance and more like attention. The difference I was realizing was in what she was trying to control. She had always been watching everything. What was different now was that she seemed to have accepted, for the moment at least, that control was not the point. She helped me carry plates out without being asked. She complimented the short ribs specifically, not generically but specifically. She said the wine and the braise, whatever I'd used, had done something to the meat that she wanted to try herself, and would I be willing to share the recipe? I told her it was nothing special, just a bottle of decent Burgundy. She said she always used the cheap stuff and maybe that was her problem. It was a small exchange. The kind of thing that happens at every dinner table, but it was real and it was new and I registered it. After dinner, while Devin and Marcus and Amber were on the porch talking and the candles had burned low, Diane helped me in the kitchen. We washed dishes side by side without discussing it. She just picked up a dish towel and started drying. I saw them again, she said. After a while, I knew what she meant. All of them, I said. All 800 and something, she said. I asked Marcus to send me the link again. I sat with them for 2 evenings. A pause. Riessa is extraordinary. The one in the suite before the ceremony, your mother holding your hand, I had never seen that one. That's my favorite, I said. I can see why, Diane said. She dried a serving dish slowly. Your mother looks at you like you're, she stopped. Like what? I asked. Like you're the best thing she ever did, Diane said. I recognize that look. I stopped washing. She put the dish towel down on the counter and looked out the kitchen window at the back porch, at Marcus laughing at something Devin had said, at the candles guttering in the June evening. I looked at your face, she said. In the original, the real ones, I made myself look at each one where you were in the frame. She paused. You look like yourself. Just exactly like yourself. I know, I said. And she stopped again. She pressed her lips together briefly. He looks at you the way I always hoped someone would look at him. I didn't say anything. I wasted time, she said, being afraid of what I might lose. And in the meantime she made a gesture, small and precise, the gesture of someone who has found the word and doesn't like it. I was foolish. You were scared, I said. She looked at me. I think she had expected something sharper. You were scared, I said again. It was still wrong. Both things are true, she nodded slowly. Both things are true, she agreed. We went back to the dishes. The sound of laughter from the porch came through the screen door. A firefly appeared in the yard briefly and then was gone. It was not everything. It was not a full reckoning or a perfect reconciliation or the kind of ending where you know that nothing will ever go wrong again. It was a Tuesday evening in June with dish soap and a candle on the porch and a woman I was still learning how to trust, standing beside me at my kitchen sink, trying. That's what I have to tell you about all of it, looking back. The photographs, the ones Riessa took on September 17th, there in our album in our bedroom on the shelf beside the window. 843 images of one day, documented with precision and care by a woman who understood that the truth of a moment is not something you improve. It's something you catch or you miss, and if you catch it, you protect it, and if you're lucky, it lasts. My face is in every one of them. My actual face. With its soccer game nose and its tired eyes and its particular arrangement of features that Marcus Holbrook has memorized, and that no algorithm chose and no preference curated and no amount of discomfort could make anyone improve. The original, I kept learning, was not a deficiency, it was the whole point.